It started like the kind of story no one believes until it happens to them. A family had just moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood, their dream home finally within reach. The husband, wife, and their 2 children carried boxes inside with smiles, ready to build a life full of memories. But not everyone was smiling. From the first week, whispered conversations and cold stares followed them. Neighbors who had once waved at strangers suddenly shut their blinds. The Homeowners Association, the HOA, began sending letters, petty complaints about their lawn, their driveway, even the color of their front door. At first, the family brushed it off, believing it was just part of settling into a new place. But the tone grew sharper, harsher, and more personal. They weren't just being asked to change things, they were being pushed out. And behind every letter was the same message, silent but clear: you don't belong here. The husband tried to reason with them, attending HOA meetings, showing kindness, and offering solutions. But each time he walked into that room, he was met with silence and judgmental stares. It wasn't about the grass or the paint, it was about something much deeper, something unspoken but impossible to ignore. Soon, letters turned into warnings, and warnings became threats of fines. Failure to comply may result in further action. He came home weary, his children asking why the neighbors didn't wave back, his wife quietly holding his hand under the table. What was supposed to be their safe haven had begun to feel like hostile territory. Still, he stayed calm. He believed that if they followed the rules, treated everyone with respect, the tide would turn. But the tide didn't turn. It only rose higher, and the storm was yet to come. One evening, after another letter stuffed into their mailbox, the wife unfolded the paper slowly. This one was different. It wasn't about grass length or trash cans. It was an official notice: the HOA had moved to begin proceedings that could force them out of their home. Her hands trembled as she read the words aloud, her children listening from the stairs with wide, fearful eyes. That night, the house was quiet, the weight of injustice pressing down on every wall. She saw the sadness in her husband's face, the confusion in her children's questions, and something inside her shifted. She had been patient, silent, letting her husband shoulder the burden. But no more. She wasn't just a wife, or a mother, or a homeowner. She carried another title, one that demanded respect. And the neighborhood was about to see exactly who they were trying to push out. The next HOA meeting was crowded, neighbors whispering in corners, curious to see how the drama would unfold. The president of the association, papers in hand, prepared to read out the violations once again. The room fell into its familiar silence, until the doors opened. She walked in, calm but unshaken, her posture straight, her uniform crisp. The navy blues caught every eye, the medals on her chest shimmering under the fluorescent lights. The whispers stopped. For the first time, the room was speechless. She didn't need to raise her voice. She simply stood there, a living symbol of service and sacrifice, and introduced herself. "I am the owner of this home. And I have served this country with honor." The president fumbled with his notes, caught between arrogance and the weight of truth. This wasn't just a neighbor he was challenging. This was a veteran, a protector, someone who had given more for the flag than any rulebook could ever demand. Her words filled the room, not with anger, but with undeniable truth. She reminded them that freedom wasn't about choosing who belonged, but about standing equal under the same sky. "I've worn this uniform in places far more dangerous than this room," she said, her voice steady. "And I didn't serve so my family could be told they don't belong in their own home." Some neighbors lowered their eyes, shame spreading across their faces. Others shifted uncomfortably, realizing how blind they had been to what was really happening. For the first time, the HOA president had no reply. Every violation they listed crumbled under the weight of her words. The complaints about lawns and doors seemed small, pathetic, even, in comparison to the courage standing before them. Silence hung heavy, but it was no longer one of judgment. It was the silence of people realizing they had been wrong. The next day, the family noticed a change. The blinds that once snapped shut now remained open. A neighbor who had never spoken before brought over cookies. Another stopped by just to say hello. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't instant redemption, but it was a start. The HOA dropped its case quietly, almost embarrassed to admit defeat. The family, though relieved, didn't celebrate with noise. They celebrated with peace, by sitting on their porch together, smiling as their children played in the yard without fear. And though the scars of those first painful months remained, so did something stronger, the knowledge that they had stood tall, that they had not been broken. Respect, once denied, had finally been earned. In the end, the wife didn't just save her family's home, she reminded an entire neighborhood what courage looks like. She showed them that strength isn't in rules or titles, but in the heart that refuses to back down when injustice knocks at the door. The family stayed, planting roots that no letter could ever tear up. Their story became more than a fight with an HOA, it became a lesson whispered from porch to porch, neighbor to neighbor. A lesson that every home carries not just walls and windows, but stories, sacrifices, and dreams. And no association, no prejudice, no piece of paper could ever take that away.